Right, but we are going to travel to Belfast in Northern Ireland, and we're going to visit one of the most famous shipyards in the world. And we're going to visit there because a fantastic exhibit is there. It's called the Titanic Belfast, and it is the shipyards where the Titanic was built. I'm speaking to Eimear Lafferty from Titanic Belfast. Eimear, welcome to Tell Me Where to Go.
Thank you very much for having me, Steve.
And I have to say, it probably is the most famous ship in the world, I guess, and only because it had such a tragic ending.
Yeah, of course. It actually had one journey, so it's maiden voyage, but yet still 100 years on, it is the world's most famous ship. It's gone down in history, which was, I suppose, unexpected. But yeah, still 100 years on, it's the world's most famous ship.
At the time it was launched, was it the biggest ship in the world at that time?
Yes, in that time, it was definitely the world's largest ship. It was built by over 2,000 men, and they were all residents of Belfast. So it was very much all designed and built in Belfast, and that's why we're called the birthplace of Titanic. In those days, it was quite large in scale of anything anyone had ever seen before, but I suppose in comparison to cruise ships today, it was probably quite small. Our building is based on the size and the scale of Titanic, so when you stand inside the building, it shapes exactly what it looked like looking out on the slipway, so it's built to scale, yeah.
And I guess at the time it was built, I think they started building it in 1909, but it was completed and had its maiden voyage in 1912. That must have been perhaps the biggest project that had ever been built in Belfast, although I guess they did build other White Star ships there. I mean, that was the biggest one, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course. It was called the Ship of Dreams. And of course, they said that it was unsinkable and there was nothing ever quite like it to ever come out of Belfast. Even the naval architecture behind the ship itself was quite iconic. And of course, to get a ticket on Titanic was like gold dust. Everyone wanted to go to America at that time. So even getting it was amazing.
Of course, it was built specifically for the transatlantic route. From what I understand, the ship, they said it was unsinkable because it had separate compartments under the water, so that if it got a gash or another ship crashed into it, only one compartment would fill up. But of course, when it crashed into the iceberg, most of the icebergs, only about 1/7 of an iceberg is above the water. And so as it brushed past it, the reason why it sank was because that iceberg actually slithered open several compartments. Is that true?
Yes, they say that's true. Many sort of, I suppose, theories as to why it. The most reported one is that it did hit the iceberg and that it did go down that way. It was an unsinkable ship. It didn't line up. And unfortunately, it did hit the iceberg. It was just an unfortunate timing.
Now, I'm interested in the Titanic Belfast, the experience there, because, of course, you're taking a very tragic incident. But then again, you're also making it an exciting place to visit. That must have been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are the birthplace of Titanic, and it was built on our slipways. And what we've done is we've created a visitor experience to tell the tale. However, we're also there to protect its legacy and how we tell the story and be respectful to the people who were on board, not only the passengers who sailed on her, but of course the crew that were on board as well. So what we've done is we've told a story in a historic way, in terms of we detail everything from the design and the fit out, what it was like on board, life on board, first class, second class, third class.
I bet there was a huge difference between first class and third class.
Yeah, well, I like to think that I would have been on first class. However, when I sort of delve into the history, I realised that I would have been more a third class citizen. Unfortunately, when you look at the ticket price, when you compare them to prices today, I was like, I'd be a third class citizen. So it came, I suppose, with great transparency in terms of what class you were in those times, and it was very important back then in terms of whether you were first class, second class, or third class, and it all came down to wealth.
Yes.
So that's sort of where the difference in the tickets came from as well.
I guess a lot of the people that were in third class were going to the United States to begin a new life, I assume,
That's
because let's
it.
face it,
Yes.
that's what the Irish were doing at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were emigrating in great numbers. And of course, they were going to the USA for hopes of a better life. And it was called the Ship of Dreams. And I suppose that's why it was doing the cross Atlantic and why they were taking that journey. Of course, even in a third class passenger, life on board Titanic in a third class position was still, I suppose, an experience people like never had before. It was just something so different and an opportunity they would never get again.
Now, I know that there is a surviving White Star ship that's part of the Titanic Belfast, and that's the SS Nomadic. Was that a sister ship to the Titanic, or because it seems to be a lot smaller than the Titanic, or was it not?
Yeah, in scale, it's quite small compared to the Titanic. It was a sister ship of Titanic, and it was a tender. So it carried passengers over and back. So what we've done, it's actually the last White Star Line in the world, so no others exist. So Britannic is gone, Titanic obviously is gone, so all that remains is SS Nomadic, and we have that in our dry dock facility in Belfast, which you can get on board. It's a small visitor attraction in itself.
As part of the experience of going there, is it divided into several sections, the exhibition?
Yeah, so at the moment it's a self-guide. It's a series of galleries. So at the moment we have a total of 9, and it takes you everything through from its design, its construction, its fit out, its sinking, its aftermath, and of course Titanic beneath the ocean today. So you can see footage of Titanic, of what it looks like as a wreckage under the ocean.
And for people that perhaps don't have English as their first language, do they get a set of headphones or something like that to help describe?
We provide audio guides. I think it's 11 different languages. So yeah, we can provide to all nationalities. So far, we've welcomed 8 million people from 145 countries around the world.
Now, my understanding is, because one of the other things that Belfast is famous for is, of course, filming Game of Thrones. And am I right in thinking that Game of Thrones was filmed very close to where the Titanic Belfast is?
Yes, very close, actually. I would say less than 300 metres away. To where our building is located. So the Game of Thrones was filmed in Titanic Studios. Like parts of it, not all of it. Other parts and outdoor parts were filmed in iconic locations around Northern Ireland. But yes, majority of it was filmed in the Titanic Studios, which is quite close by. We also have a filming set beside us, which is an outdoor set.
Yep.
And you can see that from Titanic Belfast, so you can get a glimpse in as well.
As a visitor, do you get some idea of the size of the Titanic, for instance? Is there, obviously not the ship, is there actual recreation, say, of how tall it was or how long it was?
Our building is actually the size and the scale of Titanic.
Right.
So it mimics the front of the ship. So we're a 4-point building. And if you look it up, you can see that it mimics the bow of a ship, so the front of a ship. And it's actually built to the exact same scale as what Titanic was. So when you're standing beside it, you can see how large it was.
That should be pretty much overwhelming, I guess, to see the actual size of the ship or some aspects of it. It must be quite overwhelming. And I guess also if you go back to, say, 1912, when it had its maiden voyage, it must have been just incredible for the first crew and passengers to board it, to see the magnificence of the ship.
Yeah, absolutely. In those days, again, it was built by hand, and they'd never seen anything quite like the scale of what Titanic was. And again, it was all built by hand, so everything was done by men who lived in Belfast. So that's one of our focal points, is that it was built by us.
Now, for people who want to visit the Titanic Belfast, do they need to pre-book, or is it something where you can just turn up on the day and get in?
Yeah, so we would recommend pre-booking. It depends on the time of the year. We're extremely busy from May until around September, but we always do, as a whole, recommend pre-book. And you can do so directly on the website.
Belfast is known for its fantastic weather. Is a lot of this outdoors, or is it mainly indoors?
Majority of the galleries are indoors. However, we do have a discovery tour as well, which is predominantly outdoors. So for all the outdoor fanatics who are interested, Maritime they're interested in architecture, how the buildings were built. That details more of that. So it's an outdoor experience. It takes you over the slipways, of course, where Titanic was built,
Yep.
and it gives you a little bit more information on that.
How long would you suggest if you want to go and visit? Would you spend a couple of hours there?
Yeah, so we would recommend a minimum of 2 hours when you're there.
Right. And the website, if people want to go to the website and have a look, it's just titanicbelfast.com, titanicbelfast.com. And I tell you what, it's really interesting having a look at that, and I can imagine just looking at the website, it looks like it's just a fantastic place to visit. Eimear Lafferty from Titanic Belfast, thank you very much for chatting to us on Tell Me Where to Go.